Good morning. My name is Jennifer Jolo, and I'm the board president here at Art 321. On behalf of the Art 321 community, I welcome you here to celebrate Ann's celebration. I'm honored to help guide us through her celebration of life this morning. And as we share our stories and memories, my hope is that we'll feel that we're not alone, that we can laugh together, cry together, and that love can still be present even in our grief. I'd like to introduce Chris Tollefson, Ann's, as he told me, first son. Number one son. To share some thoughts with you about his mom.
Thank you all for being here, sincerely, from the bottom of my heart. And thank you, Jen, for everything you've done. You, Brian, and Vivi were the greatest friends to my mom. She loved you all and was so proud of you. Vivi, she eagerly looked forward to all the great things you were going to do. So, good luck with that. She really did love the whole family. I also want to start by thanking Laura Hunter, Brianna McFarland, and the staff of Art 321, as well as the board and members of this great organization. My mom loved this place with every fiber of her being. She fought so hard to see this organization succeed, and I can't imagine a more appropriate place to hold a celebration of her life. I still remember the day she announced to us that she decided to become a painter. She sort of retired from the school district, and if you know my mom, she had about 5 successive retirements. Sort of like stepping off a ledge. But she announced she'd always wanted to be a watercolor artist. And at the time, my brother and I think internally rolled our eyes at this, like, at best, we thought she'd get some paint by numbers kid. We didn't believe she was serious, but who took her seriously? The Casper Arts. I've said this before, but the Guild hooked her up with classes that taught her so much. She got to meet a network of artists like Holly Bryson and Holly Turner and folks here that really turned her on to art and helped her expand what she was capable of. The Guild gave her the confidence to exhibit her art for the first time in a gallery space to do so. Because of that support, my mom realized her dream and became an accomplished award-winning artist with paintings in private collections across the country, as I'd like to say. And as always, in everything she did, she was an overachiever. But she never forgot that support. And like the teacher she was, she wanted to help others achieve their artistic dreams. She saw what the Guild could become with the right space and the right vision. Just after she walked into this building for the first time, she called me, brimming with excitement. At that time, it was an abandoned cold storage warehouse filled with junk and bird droppings. But she looked past that and saw a possibility. She saw a new home for the Casper Artists Guild, one that would take it into its next 100 years. As a vibrant organization dedicated to the proposition that art is for everyone. She worked so hard to make that vision a reality, writing grants, raising funds, and working with the city of Casper to get the building transferred to the Guild, renovated, and opened as Art 321. In that effort, she worked tirelessly with her friend, assistant city manager of the New who was herself a visionary. She also saw what my mom did. And beyond that, what the entire Yellowstone district could be with the right leadership and hard work. If you grew up in Casper as I did in the 1980s or before, you know what a blighted, run-down industrial area this was. I walk around it today and I just can't believe how things have changed. The Yellowstone district has become the heart of Casper, and Art 321 has become the heart of the Yellowstone district. And I think that's due in large measure to the vision of those two ladies. I say this because Linda preceded my mom in death last year. They were the closest of friends to the end. And I don't think her efforts have ever been properly recognized. Certainly my mom never thought so. So I feel like compelled to warn folks of everything she did. My mom collected people like Linda, finding like-minded people with creativity, leadership skills, and vision. It sometimes reminded me of a French salon before the revolution. She always has the most interesting people coming into her life and stopping by our house. I'm not going to speak very much today about my mom's work. I think there are others here who address that far better than I can. But I want to tell you about Ann Tollefson, my mom. Someone who even as she poured her heart and soul into being the best teacher, facilitator, and catalyst for foreign languages, cultural understanding, and community enrichment she could be, was also an incredible mother. The kind of mom who stayed up all night baking and decorating a giant purple cake shaped like a Minnesota Vikings player because I was obsessed with them, but who also had the sense to tell me no when I wanted to paint the room purple. The kind of mom who spent hours making homemade deer jerky with me for a school project, only to turn around the next morning and do it all over again because for the first and last time in my academic career, the dog literally ate my cake. My earliest memories of my mom revolve around her efforts to bring the world to us. Every summer we host an exchange student from one of a myriad of countries, Brazil, Germany, France, Japan, all over the place. These young people taught us so much about their culture, and I looked up to them so much. We always had interesting people stop by. I remember hiding under my mom's skirts as she made crepes in the kitchen with an incredibly kind and larger-than-life woman who I only learned later, many years later, was Maya Angelou. And, I must have been about 5 or 6 years old, but that still stays with me to this day. She was beloved by her students, as well as the subject of multiple pranks. She drove a yellow Volkswagen Beetle for several years, one that ended up placed on her porch in the middle of the night, on another occasion filled with balloons, and yet another carried away and placed on the NCHS lawn. We had dozens of for sale signs placed on the lawn, and so many of her students hanging around that I felt like I had an extended group of brothers and sisters. And I think that speaks to her as a teacher, that she inspired these kids and also just made them want to hang around. We had half a dozen crepe makers and even more fondue pots because she loved to immerse her students in the culture of the language she taught. Plus, we always got to eat the leftovers. It was a great way to grow up, other than the time she forgot one sweltering fall weekend that she left a large number of very fragrant French cheeses in the trunk of the car. Now, our cars always smelled like stale coffee because she had a coffee cup rolled into her hand, but nothing made she forget the smell of stale coffee like the smell of rotting cheese. It took months before that car wasn't eye-watering. And as a child, I resented my mom for the way she loved her coffee. Those were the days before double-walled fancy cups that you can drop off a building and not spill. And before decent cup holders in cars. I say this because I think if you knew my mom, you probably always saw her with a cup of coffee in her hand as well. And I only realized later that's probably because she never got a decent night's sleep for 20 years. She was always taking care of us, and then she would spend all night after she came home, cooked dinner, and helped us with homework on lesson plans and grading and everything else. And I can't thank all of you who are teachers enough. If you are a teacher or you know a teacher, you know that it's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's not even an 80-hour-a-week job. And I don't know how she got, I don't think she got sleep for 20 years. Certainly not good sleep. So when I got to be a grown-up, I really understood how caffeine got you through the day. And yet she somehow found time to be a den mother, volunteer for the schools, for us, attend just about every game and concert. and otherwise show us every day how much she loved us. She was a proud Wyoming native, one who turned down multiple offers for prestigious jobs around the country because she wanted her kids to grow up in Wyoming, and she wanted us to have a connection to this place. She goes so much back to the University of Wyoming, her alma mater, serving on the College of Arts and Sciences Board of Visitors as well as the International Board of Visitors. She was a passionate fan of all cowboy sports. Our family has held season tickets to Wyoming games since Tollefson Memorial Stadium opened in 1952. She never missed a game if she could avoid it. She was also an utterly obnoxious fan, almost getting us in a fight at the pit in Albuquerque because the volume of her cheering and the language pissed off a large contingent of New Mexico fans. I thought we were going to have to fight our way out. But she had no regrets. She wore the same necklace to Cowboy games for 40 years and had a special pair of brown and gold shoes that she only pulled out for game days, convinced they brought luck. She believed passionately in the community she lived in and worked with. You see the results here with our 321. In the recent graduation of the first class of Chinese immersion students in Casper, the program she spearheaded, and in the newest Wing the Story Library, for which she worked relentlessly to raise funds and write grants. We live in deeply uncertain, cynical, and polarized times, and it's easy to be pessimistic and turn away from politics and civic engagement. In fact, it's the easiest thing to do, and probably the safest. But my mom refused to take the easy route. Her whole life was built on the proposition that the world is a vibrant spectrum of cultures, beliefs, and traditions. But in spite of those differences, we have far more in common than we do differences. Years before globalization and the internet, she understood that the world was getting smaller and that Wyoming had to be a part of it. She made it her life's work to build bridges with cultures around the world, to share those cultures with the people of Wyoming, and to share Wyoming with the world, because she really believed the people of this state have something to teach the world, and she wanted to facilitate that. She never gave up hope, but she was a pragmatist at heart. I remember in 1990, she ran for superintendent of public instruction, and one of her opponents was a dedicated conspiracy theorist about the one world order and all that stuff. And there was a cartoon in the Star Tribune that had two planets sitting next to her, and one was the world, according to her opponent, it said property of one world government, conspiracy incorporated, and it was very angry. And the next one had this planet saying, it's a small world after all, and smiling. Now, I think that's a little bit reductive because she was very much an idealist, but she was also a ruthless pragmatist. She had no patience for people who had pie-in-the-sky ideas and no way to achieve them. She believed in measurable results. She believed in doing what you could with what you had and always pushing hard for results. Years ago, I shared a poem with her that had a profound impact on how I see the world. It's helped me get through some tremendous losses, and I want to share it with you today. My mom loved this poem because it speaks to how she approached life. It's called A Brief for the Defense by Jack Gilbert. And without further ado, here it is. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they are starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future. Smiling and laughing while someone in the village is very sick. There's laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand again at the prow of a small ship, anchored late at night in the tiny port, looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow that are to come. I live with that, and I think about it often. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. My mom believed in that. She fought the good fight every day. She refused to let the naysayers and negativity stop her from doing what she could with what she had, day in and day out, for decades. When she was told no or that something was impossible, she found a way. She refused to let the bastards get her down. She continued to find joy and delight in the everyday, in her art, in her friends, in her dogs, and her community. She was the happiest of happy warriors. She was in no way naive about the cruelties and injustices of the world, but she never gave up, never accepted that it's just the way it is. I'm so proud to be your son, to have had her in my life for nearly 56 years. You've been an immeasurable blessing. I've been approached by several people about naming something after her, and that's great. But when the talk rolls around to appropriate memorials, I remember a trip I took nearly 40 years ago, of course with my mom, to London. While there, we visited the magnificent St. Paul's Cathedral, truly an awe-inspiring testament to faith and resilience. When the original St. Paul's burned in the Great London Fire of 1666, it was rebuilt in spectacular fashion by the architect, astronomer, mathematician, and physicist Sir Christopher Wren. Wren is buried in a cathedral that was the culmination of his life's work as an architect. Yet if you look for a memorial, all you will find is a small gravestone on the floor. It reads in Latin, Lector si monumentum requiris circumspice, which translates to, reader, if you would seek his monument, look around you. Likewise, I feel that this place, this building, incredible staff, board, volunteers and members, programming, classes, and just the feeling of creativity, possibility, and positivity I get when I walk in the door represent the greatest tribute to her I could ever imagine. Her legacy lives on in the vibrant art created here, in her students and the impact they have on the world, and in the foundations she laid here and across the country that continue to bring people together, rich cultures and languages, and make the world a more connected place. I want to thank all of you for being a part of her life. I know you enriched her life as much as she enriched yours. And I would encourage you to think about coming up and saying a few words, because it's been very comforting to hear the stories and the memories from people, and I think there are so many to tell. I could spend all day up here, but I will end things now and turn things back to Jen, but thank you all very much for being here.
That was really, really moving and wonderful, Chris. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite the second number one, Jeff, up.
Thank you all for being here. You reminded me of the yellow Volkswagen, Chris. Another amazing thing that our mom did was save Chris from flying out the side of that door out the side of that vehicle when she was turning the corner.
No, she didn't. I rolled out. But she was going really slow.
She caught you.
And I was bundled up. No, she did not. That's when she sold the Volkswagen.
Okay, well, the story that she told her second son was 4 words. Dedication. So, it's the first one that I was given. Dedication, vision, responsibility, and determination. This is kind of how I've come to think about my mom and how she led her life. Dedication was to her community, to her family. She loved her friends. She really held all of that close to her. She led a life with 2 kids and a single mother. And then when the kids left, she was single, alone in the house with dogs. But she was dedicated to her friends, to her family, to her community, and this was, she maintained connections like nobody I've ever met. To this day, I can't maintain connections that way. So this was kind of how she thought about her life. She wanted to, be good to everybody around her and to make things better. Vision is, I think, a real key. All of us live in at least kind of 4 dimensions. I think for my mom, you could add the mountain's potential. She didn't look at a space or a person or a student without thinking, what that person or that space could be with a little bit of work. She wanted to make her students, smarter, better, wiser, kinder, and I think she accomplished that. When we bought houses, when she bought houses, my brother and I, we just grew up in construction zones. That's all we did. She would buy a house and then start tearing down walls and building decks and all this. So we grew up in a household with hammers and nails and drills and carpenters and plumbers and all of that. So this was kind of part of how she thought. And I do recall, it's very apropos here, I came with her, I think, on the first or the second vision, or the second trip to this building, when it was just a cold warehouse. No lights, no heat, no anything. And she was able to look through all that and say, I think it's going to work. And all this at a time when the Artist Guild was still, I think a small thing. This was a big project. It was a very big project. And she had to work with the city. She had to work with the guild, with all sorts of people to make it happen. And of course, it was not all her, but I think she was certainly a driver. And when she moved up to Story, I think she came to think about this as her last gift to her home community in Casper. She could imagine things in spaces where few other people could, and I think I imagine that she could imagine that we would be here today celebrating her life after she passed. I do believe that. Responsibility. This is just a simple one. For her, we all have a responsibility to do our best to make the world a better place, to live up to our potential. This is something that she taught Chris and I from the very beginning. You never complain. There's always somebody who's got it worse. If you don't live up to your potential, then you're just you're wasting opportunity that could have gone to somebody else. So always try, do your best, make the world a better place. And determination. Yeah, if you think about her, I think this is the last piece for me. She had a commitment. She knew what she wanted. She had visions. But like my brother said, she also had an ability to get them done. And it wasn't just about being pragmatic. That was part of it. It was also about being determined. She really was determined from the beginning to the end to make a difference. The quote that I'll leave you with, and this is the one that I carry with me on a daily basis. I'm constantly afraid of failure, and I do measure myself up to her, and I always fall short on that measure. But this is the line that I keep. Jeff, if you really want something in this world, sink your teeth in it and don't ever, 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 ever let go. That's 5 evers. And I have counted those evers like so many times. I think it's easy to look at a challenge and to kind of turn away or accept something less. And she rarely did, In the end, if you watch this video, she gives a little speech where she kind of says what she hopes people will remember of her. And basically her line is, I hope in the end that people remember me for trying to make a difference. And that's enough. I think she tried to make a difference. She did make a difference. This is evidence. And I will always be proud. So, thank you.
That was also a beautiful tribute to your mother. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome Ann's friend, Ann Tollefson.
Hi, I'm Ann. That's Ann with an E. I was sitting there and I was listening to the boys speak. And I've come to love them as my brothers. Because that's what Ann did. She called you in. She made you family. And ironically, I was sitting there and I the other day, I sent Chris a couple of memes, because that's what I do. I'm a French teacher. I used to teach French with Scott at NC, and now I'm over at Kelly Welsh, been there for 14 years. And one of the things that she taught me, and she taught our children, is that if you can't say something nice, say it in French. And so I started spamming Chris. And one of the things that I sent him that reminds me so much of Ann is a quote. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. By Maya Angelou. And I remember when Maya Angelou released And Still I Rise, and I talked to your mom about it. And she never told me that she'd been making crepes with the woman, never told me that she knew her. Ann Tollefson knew everybody. I was lucky enough through knowing Scott to be introduced to the family, to be accepted by the family. And in 2001, my brother got married shortly after 9/11, and we went back for the wedding. And I took my high school French teacher out for coffee because I told him there were 2 things I'm never going to be. I'm never going to be a coach, and I'm never going to be a French teacher. And then I became a coach and a French teacher. And then I met Ann. And so when I was telling him, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Casper, Wyoming." He said, "Oh my God, there's this amazing woman that lives in Wyoming, and you have to meet her." I said, "Her name is Ann, isn't it?" And he goes, "You know, Ann Tollefson." I said, "Yeah, I'm putting on her storm windows when I get back." And so Chris asked me to say something, and he said, "We're counting on you to be the humor." So I hope I fulfill, because I'm not really necessarily all that, actually really serious in the classroom, but I always go for the cheap laugh. And so I wanted to start with a quote that has always reminded me of Ann, by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I'm going to come back to Emerson in a little bit. Ann would be very proud of me. Ann always got everything done on time and early, and I'm a master procrastinator. And I'll talk about that, but I actually sat down and I typed this out. Your mom would be so proud of me that I actually did this on time. So Emerson said, his definition of success: to laugh often and love much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the approval of honest critics and to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to give up oneself, Sorry, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden catcher, or redeemed social condition. To have played and laughed with enthusiasm and sung with exaltation. To know that even while life is breathed easier because you have lived, this is to succeed. And Ann did that. Ann did that every single one. When I started teaching at Casper, I came to Casper in 1997. And when I started teaching at Casper Ann Tollefson through Scott, I met her through Scott, and will forever be thankful. Ann Tollefson was my mentor first, then she became my friend. Then she and her sons, Chris and Jeff, and Chris's kids became my family. And my life and my children's lives have been so much better for it. In her interview that you'll see at the end with Avant's assessment, which of course she helps her, a lot of us shared online. Ann said, I'd like to think I contributed a few ideas. Well, I just want to ask you, when did Ann Tollefson ever just have a few ideas? She never just had it. She had lots of ideas, and they were always good. Ann was easily the most intelligent, quick-witted, motivated, compassionate person I had ever met and ever known. To have a conversation with Ann meant you had to be on your best mental game. You really did, just to keep up with her. You know, I liken it to, I'm trying to do a cartwheel and she's the Simone Biles of intelligence. And I'm thinking I'm pretty good because I'm getting the cartwheel done. If you didn't keep up, she'd call you out in such a way that you'd laugh and you'd walk away, and then about a half hour later you'd realize, hey, wait a minute. that was quite the zing. My children both learned from Ann, and they both became language students and are multilingual. That if you can't say something nice, say it in French. That way no one understands, but you still get to laugh with your friends. And when you say it in French and people laugh, those are your people. So due to Ann's influence, both of my children are multilingual. And they both went to University of Wyoming. When my son was looking at colleges, I said, well, you know, I think he'll probably just end up at UW, and boy, did she take offense to that, just UW. She sat me down and kind of read me the riot act, and there's nothing wrong with UW. The only other time that she got that angry with me, was I'm a University of Notre Dame graduate, and in the 1980s, Notre Dame played in the University of Miami, and we got the first Catholics versus Convicts t-shirt. So I broke it out, and boy, was Ann pissed. And she was like, I'll have you know that Chris went to University of Miami, and I don't ever want to see that t-shirt again. Okay, that will never be shown again. Ann was a doer, and I'm a procrastinator. So I very often frustrated her at the beginning of our friendship when she mentored me. When I came to Casper to teach at NC, I had no teaching certificate. I had been teaching at the University of Notre Dame. And so she talked to me about this program that they had in Wyoming, and I think it was the veterans that helped start this, right, who were here present, that you could do a certificate by portfolio. And so she got me all the information, and she said, you're going to do this. But again, I'm a procrastinator, so I didn't do it. What did I do? Scott and I took the kids and we went to Mexico. She called us from Mexico and said, get your ass back here, because you have a portfolio to do and to turn in. So when Ann tells you to do something, it's always easier to just do it. I found after asking why for so many years, it was just easier to roll with it. She'd call you up and say, I need you to, okay, all right, yeah, I'll just do it. So I came back, I got the portfolio done, I believe I handed it in to Donna and then sent it off to the state. I did it in 3 days, and then a week later she called me and she was laughing. Someone in the state said they had read my portfolio, weren't entirely sure I should get the certification or not, so they sent it to Ann to read. And Ann said, you didn't read it. And the person at the state said, yes, I did. She said, no, you didn't, because if you had read it, you would have opened up the very first page and seen that the very first letter of recommendation was by me. I wrote it. And I think, she told him, I think it's a conflict of interest that I am recommending her, and you're asking me to evaluate the people who are recommending her. And so she told me, so I told that idiot that I was a brilliant recommender, and that you should just get your certification. So I did. You gotta love Ann. Ann did not suffer idiots well. When I transferred from NC to Kelly Walsh, Ann was not happy. She was not happy at all. And so I got a call from Brad Diller, and he said, hey, I need to see you for a minute. I said, okay. And he said, it's about a letter of recommendation. Okay, and I think Doug, you wrote me a letter of recommendation, Gloria wrote me a letter of recommendation, Scott wrote me a letter of recommendation. He said, no, it's not about those, it's about Ann's. I was not aware that Ann wrote me a letter of recommendation. She hand-delivered it to Brad, and the very first line is, I am not happy about having to write this letter of recommendation. I don't know who the idiot is at NC that's pushing Ann out, but this is ridiculous. And that was always her line, this is ridiculous. What was this? Who is a silly person? So she went on to say, that to tell Brad that at some point I will argue back with him because I was a difficult human being, but she was right, I am. And I will argue back, and when I argue back, he should probably stop and take a good look at what he's doing, because chances are he's wrong and I'm right. And all I can say is that is probably the best thing that anyone has ever said about me, is that I will probably right. She also told him, of course, that I was incapable of keeping my mouth shut, and he was just going to have to learn how to deal with that. And so, Ann was my biggest supporter. She was my biggest mentor. In her travels, she had the opportunity to observe amazing teachers across the U.S. If your child has been in the DLI program, taken a language, studied a language, had anything to do with languages in all the Western states, chances are she had something to do with it. And she put the people there. And so every time she would come back and she'd end up at the house telling us about this amazing lesson she saw. This teacher was amazing. This teacher did this. This teacher was dancing and singing. And I looked at her, and every so often I'd have to say, yeah, you were a cheerleader in college. I was a fencer. I played with weapons, and I did hand-to-hand combat. If I start singing and dancing in the classroom, the principal is going to come over and breathalyze me. And so then she'd laugh and then sit down and we'd figure out what part of this amazing lesson I could actually pull out without being removed from the classroom. But Ann was always doing that, seeing something amazing, spreading the idea to all of us. Ann was always creating and offering opportunities for us all to experience something different and do something different so that we could make a bigger impact for our students. I was contacted by, I don't even know how many language teachers that are now spread across the United States who were sorry that they couldn't make it here today. We have an entire slew of the next generation of language teachers that right now are down at the University of Wyoming for World Language Day with their students, and they were all affected by Ann. They were mostly taught by Ann. They were inspired by Ann. But like me, some of them are procrastinators because they said they would get cards to drop off, and so I'll send that to you when they get back because they didn't get them to me, but that's okay. Her philosophy that she mentions, that the boys mentioned in her Avant video, was to have adventures, create adventures, and then take responsibility and bring those adventures back to the classroom to benefit the kids. Ann was a force of nature who always had the best interests of her students and her teachers at the forefront of everything that she did. Absolutely everything. At one point in time, she came over, I've got this great idea, I've got this great program, I'm sending you to Senegal. Well, I was pregnant with Liz at the time. And I said, Ann, I'm about 6 months pregnant. By the time this trip goes, Liz will be a 3-month-old. I cannot go to Africa with a 3-month-old. She told Leslie Van Better, Ann has a passport for Liz at 3 months, so you can just bring her with or just leave her on the strap, whenever you're going. And I said, I'm not going. So I hung up the phone, and about 2 minutes later, Leslie Van Better called me and she said, well, Ann just called me and said, we're going to Africa, and why aren't you going? So, Ann was like that. She found opportunities because she got opportunities, and she wanted to make sure that the rest of us had them as well. And so she brought them back to us. Ann never met someone who was smart and quick-witted that she didn't like. As a family member, Ann called me often. She lived a few blocks away from us when she needed something done in the house. If Jeff wasn't home and her handyman was busy, I got the call. And it usually started with something like, hey, it's Ann. How you doing? How are the kids? How's Scott? Oh, great, everything's great. What do you need? And she'd tell me, and I'd say, what tools do I need? And do I need to bring Ben? Ben is my son. Ben is about 6'3" and 230 pounds of solid rock muscle. And she would say things like, there was one time she said, well, I bought a mirror. I bought a mirror and I need you to hang it out because, my shoulder's not good. Well, we got to the house, and I got to the house, and I couldn't even get the mirror out of the car. If you were in Ann's dining room here in Casper, There was that ginormous 5-foot-tall mirror that hung on the wall in her dining room. I hung that. My son and I hung that. I had to call back to the house and say, put that on the phone. I can't even get it out of the car. That's how big and heavy this is. And you're going to have to bring these tools, you're going to have to bring this, because Ann said, well, just put a nail in the wall and hang it up there. It's like, I don't even, it's like 70 pounds, so I'm not going to be able to hang this from the wall. You need special things. So very often we got the calls, and Ben would just look at me and say, what tools do I need? Because Ann had a lot of tools, and she would tell me, you don't need that. You don't need to bring anything. And the first time I went over, I swear to God, I know Ann was not old enough to know Ralph Waldo Emerson, but I'm pretty sure she inherited his tools. Because she gave me a stepladder that I looked at and said, first of all, just looking at that, I feel like I need a tetanus shot. Second of all, that's not, I don't know what that is, but that is not a hammer. I'm not using that. And so very often we would have to go home and find our own tools, then bring them back. There was, Ann called me one time and she said, you know, I'm setting up this, I changed the back room, I'm setting up a media center. And I bought a giant TV, and I said, it's in the car, isn't it? Okay, all right, Ben, let's go. We gotta set this up. And then we got there, and we thought we were just moving the TV from the back for Subaru into that back room. No, then we were setting up her speakers and her sound system and a gaming system. And Ben turned around and said, Ann, when do you game? And she said, well, Chris and the kids are coming, so I want it here so that my grandchildren can have it when they get here. And I said, do we have to do all this tonight? Because this was like a Thursday night. Like, I got school tomorrow, I got stuff to do, Ben's got to go to school. And she said, Chris and the kids are arriving tomorrow. Okay, I guess I'm here till we get this working. The next time that she called, it was if you were in her backyard, in her artist studio, there's this ginormous IKEA-esque art table with multiple drawers. And Ben and I showed up, and she said, it's just a little table you have to put together, something, a table, a couple of legs, it's gonna be easy. And then we look at it, and my son goes, shit, Mom, I've got a test tomorrow. Well, that Ann's excusing you from school, right? We got 3/4 of the way through that project. I don't know if it was IKEA, but when we opened it up, the directions were in Mandarin, and they were, I think, in Swedish. And I said, I don't speak either of these languages, Ann. And she will just follow the pictures. You can do it, you're fine. And that's what Ann would say. She would never say, I'm proud of you. I would say things like, I don't think I can do this. And she'd say, don't be silly, of course you can. Don't be ridiculous, just start doing it, you'll figure it out. Well, we got about 3/4 of the way through that giant art table when we realized that the company had said 2 left sides. She didn't have a right side to that table. And I said, Ann, there's a problem, we can't do this, the right side is missing, we got 2 left sides. And she goes, we'll just figure it out. Okay, I'm a French teacher, I feel the need to remind you I'm not a carpenter. She's like, you'll be fine. I was not in fact fine. Ben, I think, finally got his tools, laid down on the ground and started going to sleep because it was pretty late. But now I will let you know that my son is brilliant at putting together all sorts of IKEA furniture. Anything that his wife buys, he's like, Mom and I got this, we're good. When Ann asked you to do something, you did it. Not just because she'd already done so much for us, because Ann asking meant she trusted you. Ann was the most independent, fiery, amazing soul I've ever met. So when she asked for help, you just did. You did it. You did it because Ann asked. You did it because you wanted to do it for her, and she wouldn't ask you twice, so you did it the very first time. So that meant when she called me, she trusted me. And that meant the world to me. And I know she's done that with many of you as well. So I helped with the mirror and the entertainment center. And the storm windows, putting them on, taking them off, putting them on, taking them off. The sandbox that was out front, she called me out, I got a sandbox. I said, that's lovely. And she said, Chris is coming tomorrow with the kids. I need your help putting it together. I'm like, can you give me like a weekend to do this? No, the kids were coming, they needed a sandbox. And when Chris and Jeff came to town, she would call up and say, hey, they're gonna be here, so clear your schedule. And Scott and I would look at each other and go, we had other things planned. And she's like, I'm sorry, did I not tell you Chris and Jeff are coming, the kids are coming, clear your schedule? Okay, all right, clearing the schedule and doing it. When she asked, we did it. When Chris's boys came to downtown, that meant that Liz was booked for that time. That meant they'd be going swimming, they'd be doing art projects, they'd be going bike riding. Liz was booked And that's just the way it was. When she decided to start doing watercolors, Chris's kids came, and next thing I knew, Liz came back with a beautiful watercolor that Ann had helped the kids do. All 3 kids did one, and it's still hanging in my house to this day. She called me in the middle of the day a few years back, which she never did unless it was hugely important, and I was up at Central Services in the middle of a SAC committee deciding curriculum. And so I answered the phone, because your mom never interrupted school. And I said, what's up, what do you need? And she said, Art 321. I said, yeah. Someone's trying to do a hostile takeover, and I need you to jump online right now and join. Okay, I'm not an artist, doesn't matter, I need you to join. Okay, so I started looking, and I said, Ann, it's $50 to join. And she's like, yeah. Okay, I guess I'm joining Art 321. And she said, well, okay, so you got it, you joined? Yeah, I'm joined. Okay, I'll tell you what to do next. Give me Catherine Banky's number. Why? Because she's going to join. Okay, well, I'm up at the Hill right now, so I'm just going to hand the phone around. We had about 24 language teachers in the room that day. Catherine was the next person I handed my phone to, and every single one of us signed up. Carew was there that day, I think Des was there that day. We all signed up for our 321. Why? Because Ann asked us to do it. What were we going to do? I have no idea, but she'll let us know. Just sign up for it, because Ann asked. When Ann asked you to do something, it was because she knew you could. When she told me, when we started the IB program at NC, she said, oh, by the way, I don't think I told you this, you're teaching theory of knowledge. And I was, what is that? She said, well, it's a critical thinking class. I don't think I can do it. I'm just a French teacher. And she said, don't be silly. Of course you're going to do it. Okay, I guess I'm learning a whole new class. All right. She never said, I believe in you. She just said, of course you can do it. And in doing that, she changed the course of my life. She changed the course of my children's lives. She gave us the opportunities to do more, to achieve more, to shine more, to become better versions of ourselves for our students, for our families, for our community. In the Avant video, she said, I just have to hope that at the end of the tape, you know, when they look back at me, that they say she worked hard, she tried her best to make a difference, and that's all. Just a teeny difference. But it was a difference. Well, if Ann were here, and I guess she is, first of all, she'd be so proud of me that I didn't procrastinate too much. But I'd have to tell her, how silly. Of course you made a difference, and not a teeny difference. Ann made a massive difference in every life that she touched. And she did it with her quick wit, with grace, with mischief, with intelligence, with great love for us all. And she did it with a whole bunch of laughter along the way. And we are all better for having known and loved by her. Thanks. I got messages from all over the U.S. And one of the people is, sorry, I'm trying to find it. And I know I'm using my phone. This is terrible. The teacher, I'm not supposed to have technology, right? It was by, oh my goodness. Sorry, it's such a, yeah, please, thank you. Okay, there we go. Maria Garcia and Luis Martinez emigrated here from Colombia after a lot of difficulties there. And Maria and Luis sent me this morning and asked me to say this because she knew that people would be asked to speak. Dear Ann, it's so sad to say goodbye today, but we will always remember you. Luis, Nico, Camilo, Sarita, and I will forever be grateful for the support you offered us when we arrived in Casper 20-some years ago. We were starting a new life, and you didn't hesitate to help us. I personally never imagined that I could be a teacher, but you did. And so you gave me the opportunity to become a Spanish teacher, and here I am. You didn't know much about our family, but you helped us through a very difficult time. You helped smooth the path for us so that we could achieve our goals. You are largely responsible for who we are today, and you should be very proud. Rest in peace, dear friend. Love, Maria and Luis.
Thank you so much, Ann. You accomplished your marching orders. You brought the humor and the tears. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome Mark Mathern up, longtime friend and colleague of Ann's.
Good morning, everyone. As Jen said, I'm Mark Mathern. I worked with Ann a lot of years ago. I came to Casper from North Dakota as a Latin teacher. I took over for Lois Tarter a long time ago. Some of you may remember her. And I actually got a call from Bill Callahan who said, you know, we have this great place called Casper, Wyoming, and I'm just a dairy farm kid from North Dakota. I told my dad I'd be back after 5 years, because I had to get my feet under it. And I never went back. And part of that was due to Ann. Chris, I read your obituary, and there's a lot of things in there, because Ann accomplished a lot of things. International, national, state, and local. So I thought, what should I talk about today? And I'm going to concentrate more on local. So, you know, Ann was, I called it a lover of wisdom gained from other cultures. You know, all the grants she wrote. When I was a 23-year-old kid trying to teach Latin, I got this scholarship to go to Greece to study for 6 weeks. And Ann said, this is a great opportunity. This is just awesome. But I had 2 boys, married, just starting out. And she said, well, let's see if we can get some support for you. So she called central office and said, you know, this is staff development for this young man. You ought to pay for some of this. Sure enough, Lionel Robertson comes through and helps cover the costs of some of the trip. Then she calls the University of Wyoming and says, you know, there's going to be some knowledge that's gained here. You ought to give this kid some credit for this. So I had to keep a log when I was there for 6 weeks, and I got 4 credits of art history out of it. It was awesome. There was a mention earlier about foreign exchange students. So one thing that I want to talk about locally is, you know, we'd have, I don't know, 5, 7 foreign exchange students at NC all the time. But one thing Ann did was she saw real value in the entire school knowing about the culture of others. So she would have the kids excused for one day, and then she would invite class after class after class to come to listen to the students talk about South Africa or Germany or France or Japan or wherever they were from. Again, that value of learning from another culture, I think, was an important piece. You know, Ann was a stickler for language accuracy. Every once in a while, I'd screw up the difference between less and fewer. And let me know. Mark, fewer is for count nouns. Less is for non-count nouns. Remember, less money, fewer dollars. I've never forgotten that, although I probably messed up several times. And Chris, when you put in the paper that she was given an award from UW for the outstanding alumnus, I can't help but think Ann looked at that plaque and said, this really should be alumna.
That was my sweatshirt. That ain't right.
You know, she cared about the individual, and you mentioned that. We've all mentioned that. I remember her calling me, inviting me over to the house on 10th Street, saying, hey, we're going to paint this. I brought my boys over to help, and here's Ann with a hot gun, trying to take 40 years or 60 years of paint off of the walls so that we could paint that house. our son Aaron said, I remember Ann. She walked the dogs in the neighborhood. She was neighborly as well. A couple of years ago, actually it's been about 5 years ago, she called me, and Ann, as you said, you know, if Ann asked you to do something, well, you just kind of said yes. So she called me and said, you know, I just got off the phone with Jan Moore, the wife of Byron Moore, and Byron had since passed away. And she said, she is really hurting. Jan is really hurting. Why don't you give her a call? I think just having some familiarity with her friends from Casper would be really helpful. So you did what you did because Ann asked you to do that. I also remember her calling me when I was at central office, livid about some decision we had to make. And saying, you know, kind of that practical part. Mark, I know you had to make the decision, but be nice when you make the decision. People are human. Be nice, be humane. And I think that was another piece I learned from Ann. She was a relentless advocate for language acquisition. Any language. As a former Latin teacher, of course, I have to quote a few people. Here's a Latin phrase. Aut viam inveniam aut faciam, meaning, if I can't find a way, I'll make a way. That really was Ann. Of course, that was attributed to Hannibal, so nothing. So I have to tell this little story because Ann reminded me that she got into board policy an agreement that said if you took 4 years of a language, of a foreign language, you could substitute the language for an English credit. It's kind of a cool idea. Never thought it'd ever come to use. I mean, everybody should take 4 years of English. About 3 years ago, I received an email from a young man who said, Mark, I took Latin from you all those years ago, and I took 4 years of Latin, and I failed my senior English class. Had lots of other issues going on. I couldn't pass the class. And then I remembered you had said if you take 4 years of one language, you get to have an English credit. Of course, he graduated, but the reason he wrote me when he wrote me is because he had just received his PhD in math from a university in Montana. But he connected that success all the way back to some board policy that Ann got put in place all those years ago. And he never actually ever had Ann as a teacher, but her influence, of course, was everywhere. During Ann's time, we brought Latin back up to some level of success on the west side of town. We added Russian, of course, Japanese, and German, French, Spanish. All of those languages were functioning quite well. As a matter of fact, I think I might be wrong, but I think statistically half, if not more, of Natrona's students were graduating with some kind of language credit. She didn't let distance stop that acquisition. I don't know if you remember the old satellite dishes, the big giant dishes. She arranged for a crane to come to Natrona County High School, and we put one of those things on top of that building so that we could promote Russian in other schools across the state. We also got one at Midwest when I was the principal there because of Ann. When we got the grant for K2, we had this law. We still have the law in the books that says students in K2 should have some kind of foreign language. Ann said, well, these teachers just can't do that just like that. We need to have a grant. So she wrote a grant. We actually put paraprofessionals in our elementary schools because of Ann. And we use these videotapes from Georgia, one of her partners. We call them the salsa tapes. I imagine they're still out there being used. I see some heads nod.
Got a bunch in the garage.
We're looking for those crystals. And my granddaughter is one of those students who is going to graduate next year with, I think, a minor in Spanish already because of the dual language program, which of course Ann helped start. You know, I don't know if you've read any email from Ann, but this is, she quotes Catherine Porter, who was the president of the Modern Language Association. She says, few, if any, intellectual achievements open more doors in the mind, in the heart, and in the world than learning to understand and speak another language. And I think that's a message, and of course that's why Ann put that at the bottom of her email, because it didn't matter what the language was. The value is learning another culture. The value is learning, as someone already said, everybody on this earth loves their kids. They're human. They want to stay connected. And the more we gain an understanding of that, the better off we're all going to be. So I do just have one thing, and I have to say it just because I'm an old Latin teacher. For those of you who know this joke, you know, Latin teachers never die, we just start declining. So we got it. So of course, to Ann, I say, Requiescat in pace nostra amica. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. At this time now, I'd like to welcome Ann's friend Scott Underbrink. It's my understanding that you have probably known Ann the longest.
Well, the kids
I have my cane and the microphone and everything that was good. I'm staying there. Maybe it's okay. I'll pick it up there. I first met Ann between my 9th grade and 10th grade summer. That was from junior high school to high school back in those days. And she and Alberta Geraldo and Susan Jacobson were putting together this this camp, this language camp up at Casper College, where we would all stay in Casper College dorm rooms, really cool for a 9th grader. And they spoke nothing but the language. It was French all the time for the French students. And we saw a French movie, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which is really, really sappy if you know that film. But it was just wonderful. It was in French, and I understood every word. It was just jazz. And then the next time I saw her, she was obviously the force behind the languages at NC. She had organized a trip for her students to go down to Fort Collins to the Colorado State University to see a real French theater company present a Moliere play. And there was also going to be a French dinner at a restaurant in Lyons, Colorado. And she opened it up to Kelly Walsh students, which was what I had to be. And we went down with her, and I met this lady. I mean, I hadn't seen her the first time, but I heard her talking. And the most amazing thing about her, besides her really cool, naturally streaked hair, which Jeff inherited, and now his hair is gone, the way her hair went, she was driving that van, because this was in the days when the school district didn't just finance trips, the teachers had to drive. So she was driving that van, and she was pregnant with Jeff. And I thought, this woman, she's pregnant, she's driving this van, just so that her kids can hear a real French play and eat a real French meal. I was so impressed. I couldn't believe it. And at some point in time in high school, I decided that my dream of becoming a doctor, my parents so thrilled, wasn't going to work because I didn't like chemistry, I didn't like biology, but I love French and German. So I became a language teacher. And so the next time I met Ann was when I had gone through school, and I was starting to teach in Riverton. And she said, well, you need to come to the Wyoming Foreign Language Teachers Association. And my principal said, I don't know that we can trust you. I don't think we should do that. And Ann said, tell him Annie Fanny says he has to be there. And apparently, she had taught with him in Laramie when he was a little bit less than a stellar teacher, or at least he hung out he was in a first name basis with quite a good bartender. And apparently called her Annie Fanny, and so that was enough he blushed and he's let me go. And I went to these it was the Wyoming Foreign Language Teachers Association back then, when we used to call it Waffle Touch, changed the wall now. And this woman, she was showing these really cool things that she had developed. One time she had found this recording of the French Revolution that was accompanied with an album of music, the hottest French singers singing these with Robespierre and all the rest of it, and cartoon thing that went with it. She showed it to us, she shared it with all of us. So every time you went to these things, you came and you got stuff from Ann, and you brought it back, and if it worked, you were a star. One of the things I learned, though, as someone's already said, Ann was a former University of Wyoming cheerleader, and her enthusiasm made you think that you could do it. And sometimes you could. And other times, I just thought, well, I just don't deliver as well as she does. Then I got the chance to actually come and teach in Casper. In Riverton, let's just say that in Riverton, it was a very small place to be, and Casper was bigger, and it was so cool coming working with her. She always had these amazing ideas. She started going into part of Central Services as part-time every day, and part-time in here at NC as a teacher. And she would leave in the middle of the day, and she had an office right next to the classroom we were sharing. And she would come in and go out, and she said, oh, next year I'll have so much more time so that I can visit with you. There was never more time. And as I think Chris said, she would add things and add things and add things, because she was so infectiously enthusiastic about everything she did. One of the things that she did was this jump ahead a few years. I was overseas finishing up some of my studies in Russia, and when I came home, she called me, she said, I hope you won't be mad at me, but I've signed you up to be a teacher over distance learning, teaching Russian to the sick. And I said, does the plastic surgery come with it? And she said, no, you'll be fine. She sent me away to Oklahoma State University to a conference on how to do distance learning, so I learned at least some of the vocabulary, and I had lots and lots of support. She made sure that I had lots of support. I had a real technician running I don't know what all the technology was to do it. She fixed problems. I said, one of the problems I have, my Casper kids, I get to know them. When they don't understand something, I can see it on their faces, and I can help them. And I said, the kids in Gillette, they're just little, well, actually they were in Lusk that year. The kids in Lusk, there's little faces. And there's a little blonde face, masculine probably, I'm not sure. And I know the names, but I don't know which one matches which kid. He said, we can fix that. And so she looked it up, figured out how to hone in on things locally, so I actually started learning who my other students were, which helped a lot. When she was in Central Services, some people go from classroom into administration for reasons other than wanting to help kids. But her locus was on helping kids. She had the idea that if we make the teachers better, if we get the information to the teachers, we get training of teachers, then it'll be better for the kids. I mean, what a novel idea. And she always did that. She decided that social studies, living in Casper, Wyoming, a state that has, one of the things she always used in her grant proposals, a state that has something like 10 or 20 times more antelope than it does humans. That in Casper, Wyoming, it would be really good for the teachers to know something about the Soviet Union at the time, about Africa, about Asia, and she had these study opportunities for teachers, specifically social studies teachers, here in Casper, for them to come in and get some of the information. As one of the outgrowths of her African studies, there was a possibility for Casper teachers to go to Africa on a Fulbright scholarship, all done by Ann. I got to tag along because I was a French speaker, and they were going to travel to a couple of French-speaking countries. And that was an amazing thing. Ann kind of teased me that she wasn't so sure she'd follow me again, as I had followed her so many times. When we were in the Kumasi market, the second largest open market in Africa, and I wanted to go from one area to the other without going all the way back up to the highway. So we ended up walking on the top of a 10-foot wall above an open sewer. And fortunately, we didn't fall back in, but Ann kind of teased me about that for quite a long time. I think the thing that hit me when Chris contacted me and told me what had happened, I told him, I said, that's just not supposed to happen. Ann Tollefson is like an institution. She doesn't leave. I mean, I was supposed to leave before her. And I think so many of us feel that it's unreal. Obviously, it had to happen, but it wasn't supposed to happen. And I know that I can say for many of us respect her. We have gotten better because of her. We know that she loved her own kids terribly, and she's extremely proud of both of you. And she loved the kids she taught. Some of you probably are former students, and you know how she loved you. I loved her. We loved her. It was an amazing, amazing thing to know Ann Tollefson. And I shall forever be grateful for that in my life. So thank you so much, and thank you for what you did.
Okay. I'm going to just say a few thoughts of my own about Ann and what she meant to me. I have known and loved Ann for 14 years. She was both a mentor and an inspiration to me. I was immediately drawn to her. She was enthusiastic and fun. She was also a doer. I told her if I accomplished half the things in my life that she has accomplished in hers, then I would feel that I was ahead of the game. Over the years, I have been in a lot of meetings with Ann for dual language immersion, community work, and here at Art 321. I learned pretty quickly, if I sat next to Ann, I knew two things were going to happen. One, she was going to talk to me, and two, we were probably going to get into a little bit of trouble because of that. I'm also a talker and I couldn't resist. One time we were in a meeting that was emotional and heavy, the kind of meeting where you could feel the tension in the room before anyone even spoke. She leaned over and whispered to me, very seriously, Jen, if I start tapping my foot, it's because this is my oh shit boot. And I was like, what? And she said, I have a piece of paper in my boot that says, oh shit. So I'm going to tap my foot instead of saying it out loud. I had to bite my cheeks to not laugh throughout that meeting. She tapped her foot numerous times. Here's my oh shit foot, right? I'm standing here today because of Ann as the board chair at Art 321. She, like others have said, when Ann tells you to do something, you say okay. And she said, Jen, we need you to do this. And I was like, oh, I don't think I can. And she's like, no, you can. We need you to do it. And I said, okay. She encouraged me, she challenged me, and she believed in me. She made work and life a lot more joyful. Ann believed in making things happen. She was not a procrastinator, for sure, and she was very impatient with those of us who are. She believed in making things happen. She showed up with energy, conviction, and the belief that things could always be better. She inspired the people around her to step forward, to get involved, and to do more than they thought they could. She certainly did that for me. I hope we all channel Ann in our lives as we continue moving forward. Thank you. At this time, anyone else who would like to speak can. We could also take a break. We have a beautiful food set up in there. We have a self-serve coffee and hot chocolate bar, and lots of treats. So if somebody would like to speak now, or if you guys want to take a food break, you can do that. All right. At this time, I'm going to introduce Laura Hunter. She's our executive director here at ARC 321.
I don't have a lot to share with you. I am Laura Hunter. I just wanted to take a moment and share what Ann meant to me. The first time I talked to Ann was actually during a pretty difficult conversation. We were on opposite sides of the issue, and my goodness, was she stubborn. I remember getting off of that phone call and telling my husband, I don't know if I can work with this woman. Over the weeks, as we talked, we realized that we were actually fighting for the same thing, and that was to make sure that ARC 321 survived and continued serving this community. She was still stubborn. As I got to know her better, she became someone that I learned a lot from. She was likely the person that first talked me into applying for this job. I said, Ann, I don't have the first idea on how to be an executive director. And she said, don't be ridiculous. It has to be you, and you'll figure it out. She helped me understand grant writing, she proofread newsletters, and she introduced me to people who helped move this place forward again. My mother-in-law, Margaret Oakes, cared deeply about Ann, and she can't be here today, but I know that she would want you to know how special Ann was and how much of a role she played in shaping so many lives. I am incredibly grateful that I got to carry ARC 321 forward to the next generation, and Ann is the reason why that's possible.
Thanks, Laura. Ann believed in you greatly. She knew you could make this place amazing. Does anyone else want to speak at this time? This is my husband, Brian Durlow.
Hello. I debated on whether to say anything or not, but it's been some great stories up here. I'm going to take a little different turn. I'm going to read. We've been doing, if you're asking me to talk about stormwater pollution, I could be up here for 2 hours talking about it, but we're not. We're talking about Ann. And I've done a eulogy before for my grandmother, and thank you for telling me to turn my phone on silent, because right during the middle of my grandmother's eulogy, I got a call from a customer, and I was like, oh my God, seriously, don't do that. But thank you for being here for Ann. When somebody passes, we gotta remember who they really are. And Ann was somebody, definitely gave us plenty to remember, like her parrot, Bubba. Do you know anybody else who owns a parrot? Anybody else know anybody who owns a parrot? You know, okay. It's few and far between, but there's different feelings about Bubba in this room today, and we can talk about that later. Since I got to know Ann in about 2011, Bubba was a member of the household, but so were two poodles, Cricket and Winston. And through that time, I met Jeff. About 3 years ago, you came and visited or something like that. And then Chris and I got to know each other quite a bit over the past couple of years with ARC 321. He travels down here a lot for functions, and as Ann's been getting sick over the past couple of years, and his wife, his partner Ann, come down a lot too, so thank you. I suspect that somewhere in the family there's a serious conversation about what exactly is going to happen with that parrot. I've heard Southern California is a nice place to be.
He already passed away.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Keep talking about the parrot, I'll get off the parrot. But so the parrot passed away?
Yeah, we were gonna flip a coin to see the loser was gonna get it.
Yeah, I know, that's kind of what I figured.
Let him go to court.
The Ann I remember is someone who filled her life with energy and personality, education, a little bit of joyful chaos. She always just kind of seemed a buzz and had a lot of things going. When someone we care about leaves this world, it naturally seems sad. But it also brings reflection about life, about friendship, and about the mark someone leaves behind. I'd like to share one chapter of my life with Ann that meant a great deal to me. In 2011, a small group of us came together with an idea. It started around Scott's dinner table, from talking about dual language immersion, excuse me. But the idea was to bring DLI, dual language immersion education, to Natrona County. It's already been here to a certain degree with Spanish, but we were hell-bent on Mandarin. We believe that giving kids the opportunity to learn languages like Mandarin and Spanish could open their minds to a wider world and broaden their horizons. Many people involved with this program are here today, so thank you. Ann was instrumental in making DLI happen here in Casper, where my daughter learned to read, write, and speak Mandarin. Ann brought a love of learning and even deeper love of teaching that helped guide us through this process of getting DLI in like 18 months. It was miraculous when we started it from a small conversation at dinner to kids beginning kindergarten at her. But what stood out most was her passion for education, her beliefs in what the DLI programs can mean for kids, the expansion of their brain and their learning. I'm a lifelong learner. During these couple of years working together, I got to know Ann not just as a consultant or a colleague, but as a friend, and that friendship is something I'll always be grateful for. That kind of contribution doesn't disappear, and that's something I've been thinking about as we gather here today. One way I've come to think about human life is through the image of a wave on an ocean. For a moment, a wave rises up. It takes its own shape, its own motion, its own personality. We see it clearly, just like we recognize each person in this room as an individual life. But the wave was never separate from the ocean. It's always a wave. And when the vibrational energy of that wave settles, it doesn't vanish. It simply returns to the great ocean from which it came. In that way, I feel life, whether it be human or otherwise, is like a wave, an individuation of the ocean. Some people call that larger ocean the universe. Others might call it God. Whatever name we give it, we are all part of that same ocean. We are all one. And just as waves influence other waves as they move across the water, our lives affect the lives of others through the energy we share, through our kindness, our actions, and the love we give. Ann's wave touched many other waves, including yours and mine in this room. It touched the students whose futures were broadened by the program she helped create. It touched the teachers she worked with and guided, and it touched those of us who had the privilege of calling her a friend. Those ripples continue long after a wave settles back into the ocean, and energy can be felt forever. If that isn't deep enough for you, let's talk about something else. There's another idea that has shaped how I look at life that reminds me of Ann. In many ways, it seems that our lives are guided by two basic feelings, love and fear. Fear makes us hold back. It closes us off and makes the world feel like something we have to protect ourselves from if we're fearful. Love does the opposite. Love opens us up. It connects us to other people, inspires us to build things together and help one another grow. Over time, I've tried to choose a life guided more by love than by fear. And when I think about Ann, I see someone who lived that spirit, someone who used her knowledge, her relationships, and her time to help others. She lived with love. And maybe that's one of the most meaningful things any of us can do while our wave is rising. Over time, I've come to believe that death is not something we need to fear. It may simply be the moment when our small wave settles and returns to the great ocean from which it came. The place we might call the universe or God or simply home. And I believe that when that moment comes for each of us, we will be pleasantly surprised by how peaceful and beautiful that return truly is. Today we remember the wave that rose among us in the form of Ann. We remember the friendship she created, the life she touched, and the opportunity she helped for thousands of people. Ann's life reminds us that we are not separate from one another. We're all part of something larger, waves of the same ocean. Her wave rose beautifully among us for a time. And though that wave has now returned to the great ocean, the ripples she created will continue moving through all of us. And thank you for the time we have with you. Your wave made the ocean better. And the love you share will continue to move through this world for many years. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Would anyone else like to share something? Okay. Oh. I'd like to welcome Darren Bruner up to the stage now.
On behalf of myself and Chris and Jeff's many friends, I want to thank for putting up with us. She could be a bit fiery. There were not undeservedly so, because we certainly provided her with lots of fire, including a 15-foot high inferno in her front yard that was a refrigerator box at one point that brought the fire department to her front yard. She always lived on a creek for most of the time I knew her. And I think we tracked most of that creek through her house at various times because we like to immerse ourselves in it like Rambo. I can remember having to leave the house abruptly a few times because it was time for her to be mad at her sons. Including Jeff, I believe, who glued himself into his room. I believe and he glued all the windows and the doors shut, probably because he was sick of the rest of us, I guess. Like with super glue. And, for a brief period of time, she also entered sweepstakes for some reason. And I remember at least an entire summer of my life that was fueled by Tic Tacs. She had an entire garage full of Tic Tacs, and we ate them. It was a lifetime supply. 4 or 5 of us ate them in the summer, I think.
We also threw them in cars.
Yeah. And then there were the many times where we would retreat to the creek because we were in trouble. Unfortunately, she was left in her house defending it from some angry person whose, car got a crab apple lobbed in it from a badminton racket or something. So I have to remember her for her patience and also sometimes her exasperation. I think the phrase was, "What the hell were you thinking?" or something like that. Something like that. Anyway, I just wanted to share some memories with you of what I have. I love her always.
Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, now we welcome Dave Bryson, former board chair of Art 321.
I met Ann quite a few years ago. I'm up here in 2004. And she learned a few things about me. Things that I do, property management, and I do the maintenance and stuff. And she called me up one time. She says, "Can you come over and work on my hot tub?" I said, "Sure." So I went over, she didn't just ask me. She said, "You can do it." So I came over and as I was down in the hot tub working, all of a sudden I get this big slimy lick on my face. And her nice little dog was right there loving me. And I look over and Ann's just grinning at me saying, "She likes you." I'm okay. And since then I've done several things for Ann. She came to me one time and said, "We need to make our 321 better, bigger, better. But I'm going to need you." And so she gathered a few friends together, and we met over at the 307 over here at the restaurant. And I found myself surrounded with 6 women and myself at the table. And guys at the bar are looking at me like, Want to share? Ann did wonderful things, and she asked me to help her a lot. I'm really grateful for that. But she knew I could do it. We were friends with dogs. We had 3 dogs. She had 3 dogs. And she would say, hey, we're coming down to Casper. And I said, well, come on over. She said, well, I just told the dogs we're going to Camp David. And so we became Camp David after that. And every time she'd mention it, her dog would jump. And so would our dogs. Because we told them what was going on. We'd say Zoe, Pickett, and Winston. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. And I'll always remember Ann for that and everything else she did here. Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to speak? Okay. I'd like to invite you to partake in some food and more fellowship. Let's continue sharing stories and sit. We've got a display of Anne's artwork over here, and thank you so much.
Yeah.